The purpose of this presentation is to provide a brief overview of the concepts and issues associated with the identification of gifted and talented learners. The guidelines provided in this presentation are based on current best practices from the field of gifted education, along with guidance from the Colorado Department of Education. The information will hopefully provide a foundation for understanding factors to consider in the identification process and procedures that are followed. As we are thinking of how to structure our identification process, it is important to keep the big picture in mind. Our goals are to identify gifted and talented students, whom we may refer to as students with potential. In order to provide these students with appropriately differentiated curriculum and instruction, and to collect data that will allow us to assess the program's effectiveness in meeting their needs. A complete identification plan is a system of components that align and work together. The first component includes the mission the school district has for the Gifted and Talented program. The statement should reflect the overall mission of the district, but outline the specific goals for students identified as gifted. More about what should be in a definition of gifted will be discussed in the next parts of this presentation. Additional components of the plan are the types of services provided and the goals of the gifted program, the multifaceted identification process, including the types of measures used and the protocol followed, policies for appealing the identification team's decision, as well as a timeline for each component. For some, the idea of identifying students for gifted programs may seem like a daunting task. To be sure, it is not black and white, and many factors weigh into the process. However, it may be helpful to take a step back and remind ourselves of what it is that we are trying to do. We are trying to find students with abilities that are comparatively rare, emerge considerably earlier, and are significantly more advanced than others of the same age, experience, or environment. We are also looking for those who can benefit from the services that we can provide. Our task then becomes to figure out who those students might be. This diagram illustrates the variety in the type of students who may be identified as having advanced potential. Even though they may have that potential in common, their levels of achievement may vary quite a bit. For example, you may have one group of students whom we might label as having demonstrated high performance. That group of students will consist of different types of achievers. You may have a group labeled prodigies or extremely gifted, those students whose performance may mirror that of an accomplished adult. Or you may have creative producers, who are students who naturally can make connections across ideas and disciplines, allowing them to easily generate original ideas and to problem solve effectively. Finally, you may have those students we refer to as above grade level performers, because they are consistently able to master content above their grade level. On the other end of the achievement spectrum, you may have those students who have underdeveloped performance for a variety of reasons. Perhaps due to limited financial resources, their families were unable to provide them extracurricular experiences that enhance achievement. Perhaps they are culturally and/or linguistically diverse. Perhaps they have an additional exceptionality that is influencing their learning, such as a learning disability or emotional disability. Finally, perhaps due to their circumstances, familial, social, or curricular, they may be currently underachieving. As we look at this diagram, it is readily apparent that despite having advanced potential, these students are quite different from one another, which speaks to the need to develop a range of services to meet their academic needs. In the identification process, we need to make sure that our identification process, and the services that we are providing are all in alignment. However giftedness is defined will drive the type of services provided. District 51 uses the state definition of gifted. The definition needs to be operationalized, which means that it is specific enough to develop a procedure to find the students. Finally, it needs to be inclusive of all populations. This slide shows the Colorado State definition of gifted, provided by CDE. The first part of the definition states that we are looking for children who perform at or show the potential to perform at an outstanding level of accomplishment. This is consistent with our discussion of students who may have demonstrated high achievement already, as well as those students who may currently have underdeveloped performance but still have high ability. The definition states the domains that will be included, and the definition is inclusive of all cultural groups. The process of identifying students needs to be multifaceted, so we have a more holistic view of each child's potential and therefore are less likely to overlook students. This process consists of both measures of performance and measures of potential. Measures of performance will be indicators of advanced levels of achievement, such as norm-referenced achievement tests or a portfolio of work samples demonstrating accomplishment. A common measure of ability would be an intelligence test or cognitive abilities test. The data collected should include measures that are both quantitative and qualitative in nature. Quantitative measures are typically achievement or ability tests. Qualitative measures, on the other hand, are more descriptive in nature and provide more detail about the student's learning characteristics that are indicative of their advanced potential. Qualitative measures may include teacher rating scales, portfolio submissions, or classroom observation data. Our District 51 referral and review forms are structured to show measures of achievement, measures of ability, and qualitative indicators. The process of finding quantitative ability measures may include 2 steps. For example, a screening instrument would be given to all students first. Then, the data from the screener is used to determine who was given a full ability test. The full test would be step 2. In District 51, we screen all 3rd grade students and any 4th and 5th grade students that have not yet been screened using the COGAT screener. This data is used to select those that would benefit from a full battery COGAT test. It is important to note that screener scores may not be used for identification. Only the more in-depth full tests provide detailed, reliable, and valid information that can be used as part of the identification determination. The Cognitive Abilities Test, or COGAT, is used to measure students' reasoning abilities in 3 different ways: verbal, quantitative, and nonverbal. These areas represent the way a student reasons and problem solves and are not tied to a particular school subject. Guidelines for interpreting and using the scores are provided. The COGAT is one tool we have available to us to measure abilities, but other respected instruments can be used in the identification process as well. When using qualitative indicators, there are some guidelines to keep in mind. We first need to make sure that we help teachers recognize common gifted characteristics. As discussed in an earlier lesson, gifted students may exhibit characteristics that are not always positive. It is best to help teachers recognize both positive and negative manifestations of giftedness. Too often, teachers equate giftedness with compliant, get the right answer, good behavior role model students. It is important to have the teacher that knows the student complete the survey. For example, information from the teacher that provides the instruction for math should complete the scale for math. In addition, best practice would include multiple raters when possible. CDE provides guidelines on using qualitative data. We have options for gathering information through the use of normed instruments, such as the GES, Gifted Education Scales, and SIGS, Scales for Identifying Gifted Students. Our gifted identification procedure follows the state guidelines outlined in the chapter on identification. The guidelines include a process to create a referral that includes a variety of entry points, steps, and information such as universal screening, MTSS or RTI, test data, performance and observations, checklists, anecdotal records, questionnaires, and interviews. Identification decisions are never made by one person. A referral and review is created to be submitted for review by a team of gifted teachers. This process helps ensure consistency, adherence to state guidelines, and supports each GT teacher. This presentation was intended to be an overview of identification. More in-depth support will be available in our identification course.